Walt Disney stepped off the train and saw this thing under his camera and asked him what it was. Do you mind if I try it? And Chad let him try it and asked, hey, can you make me one?
Wow.
Chad's first response was no.
Welcome, Bob, to the studio.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's the first time I've seen your studio. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.
So, Bob, we've known each other for quite a while.
Yes, we have.
Almost 15 to 16 years,
Yes,
at least.
something like that, yeah.
You were one of the first people I met when I was doing deliveries, actually.
You were delivering. I remember you were delivering a small box to us that we needed urgently.
So you were actually in the movie industry, or the camera support business back then. I think it was O'Connor Engineering was the company that you were connected with.
Right.
And I remember I was delivering a box to you guys, and literally, I think that's you were one of our first customers, actually.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's good to hear.
So, Bob, how long were you doing that for back when you were in the industry?
I started in the industry 40 years ago. My first real job in this industry was in the mid 70s, 74, 75. So it's been quite a while.
What made you get into this industry? I mean, because it's not something that people wake up and say, hey, I want to be in cameras and lighting and tripods and heads and fluid heads.
Well, I was raised in Burbank, and which is, if anybody ever lived there, you know that a good percentage of the people that live there are in the motion picture and television industry. I mean, it's where Warner Brothers is located, Disney is located there. Universal is just up on the hill from there.
So you said you were born in Burbank, right?
No, raised in Burbank.
Raised in Burbank.
Actually, I was born in Canada, but came to the U.S. when I was quite young, 3 years old. So, and to Burbank at that time.
What made your family move to Burbank?
My father got a job he applied by mail, from Canada, and ended up getting a job at Motion Picture and Television Equipment House, which was actually just on the North Hollywood side of Burbank, and stayed there for quite a while. But that was his entry, and so I was raised, as in the industry. And my mom ended up in the industry. She worked for CBS in wardrobe, and my brother.
So growing up, seeing this as a child growing up in this industry, were you just appealed to what they were doing? Were you fascinated? As a kid seeing this, otherwise it's very casual to you, or it becomes something very magical to you? Which one was it?
Well, the kind of the funny thing was I found camera work, or being a cameraman, just was very intriguing to me. This when I was too young to even apply to be a cameraman, and I just thought that was be an interesting job. As I got a little bit older and more into the industry, that part of it, my interest kind of I think switched to getting into more technical side of the business. But I was just very intrigued with camera work. As a matter of fact, there was a cameraman that lived across the street from me that worked at NBC, and so I saw him, I saw what he was doing, and it interested me. So that kind of got my interest in the industry.
Could you, when we went to Cinegear not too long ago, and literally you knew almost everybody. Everybody was giving you literally high fives, and I'm sitting there very quietly trying to see wow, Bob is like a celebrity walking around. Because you really were. I mean, it was red. I mean, any person that we went past, every single person knew you.
It comes with building relationships and the kind of sales that we do in that industry is building relationships, because the sales process is quite long. You need to be there when they're budgeting, so it could be possibly a year in advance of when you actually get the order. So the relationship building is very important. And that's kind of what, after 40 years, I had built a lot of relationships in the industry. So
when you were growing up, obviously you're seeing this, and your parents were obviously in this industry. did you think that you were going to somehow, whether directly in front of the camera or behind the camera or behind the scenes, be in? Like, did you think that? Like, was that in your?
You know, I guess it kind of, some of that actually kind of just came my way. I would find out where there was a job opening through people that I knew, and applied for it. One of the first jobs I got was in Hollywood, in just off of Sunset, and this was in the 70s. A very interesting time. Very interesting place to be back then. It's I stayed there for about 4 years, and through the 70s.
What did you think you were going to do though? Like, what did you really think you were? What did you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be an astronaut today? What did you think you were going to be?
You know, I never wanted to be in front of the camera. Even in my high school days, there were a lot of my fellow classmates that were Ron Howard and a lot of others were from my high school.
Oh, they were in your high school?
Yeah. Being in Burbank, and it's just over the hill from Hollywood, so that's quite a few of the celebrities.
So it's like collective minds, right? All thinking that they're going down to the same path, right?
I suppose that's it. Or again, sometimes their family members were involved. That's like, again, speaking of Ron Howard, I think his father was in the industry, but there was quite a few others also.
So when you were okay, so what did you think you were going to be like? So did you really know? Like, did you say, "Oh, I'm going to be somehow connected with this"? Or what did you want to be? What did you want to be?
You know, it's hard to say. I didn't have that aspiration to be, a doctor or a lawyer, or it was more just finding a good, stable job back then, and that's kind of where I lived. I think directed me into this position.
So prior to that, I mean, you were at some point in your career, and I know that me and you spoke in the past that you had mentioned that you were going into the Coast Guard, or you joined the Coast Guard.
Right. Right.
How did that come about?
Well, again, I graduated high school in 1967, a long time ago, and at the time there was a draft. And
this is for the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah, for the Vietnam War, and they the draft pretty much meant there was a lottery. My lottery number was 13.
Oh,
it was that low.
So they gave you a number, and you're waiting now for them to say, pack your bags.
Which would happen when you're 19 and a half. So I graduated high school when I was. I just turned 18 after graduation. That summer I graduated. I turned 18. So you're talking like a year and a half, and then your chances of being drafted were pretty high.
And who gives you the number?
It was lottery. So there actually was a television program, and they drew lottery numbers, and
so it wasn't like email. Here comes your email.
It was based on your birth date. So they pulled numbers out of a hat, and okay, this is came to number 13. They drew July 8th, which was my birthday. And
the hearing about the potential of a lottery, what was like that? Like, was it like, it's not going to happen, or the war? Like, what was that?
Well, again, it was a very interesting time. There was a lot of, there were ways to delay it. You could get deferment, student deferment. A lot of guys had medical deferments. There was again a very interesting time. My decision was, rather than be drafted and go into the Army, they opened up that there was some availability in the Coast Guard, and I just decided to enlist.
So you enlisted thinking, so because you were so low in the numbers, knowing that your chances are very high that you're going to be called.
Exactly.
So you go into the Coast Guard, or you join the Coast Guard. How did you decide, like, the Coast Guard? Like, where did the Coast Guard even come into your mind? Like, were you familiar with them, or is it something that people have spoken about?
Well, no. I just felt that out of the choices, I did. I took tested for the Air Force, and I did, of course, when you get your lottery. The decision is almost made for you that you're going to go in the Army.
Yes.
So I did take the Army test. I did take Air Force test. And then I think it was going to the Air Force, I saw the Coast Guard recruiter and went in and talked to him. And that's kind of what.
So was that in like your school or something?
No, that was after, when I was kind of trying to decide, okay, what am I going to do from here?
Yeah. So were you scared at that moment when you thought like, oh my God, like I'm really going to go shoot some people? Like,
yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, it was on the news every night.
Just get everyone used to it.
It was, again, a very difficult time. Again, much more difficult for the guys that did go to Vietnam. But even just being raised in that era, a lot of decisions were made for you.
It's funny, like, now when we think of it, like if we think about it, like in today's age, like me growing up, and the idea that someone's going to take me to the army or to a war or go and line up and do something, like it's kind of hard to gauge. Mm-hmm. Like how did they get everyone lined up, and how people are feeling about sending their kids to a war. Yeah. That I thought was pretty amazing, or like how they got that into people's heads. Yeah.
Well, what kind of looking back on it, what's amazing to me at my age now is how young, even at 19 and a half.
Is that the age?
Yeah, that's when you got your draft notice, if you didn't do anything else as far as way of getting the deferment. But 19 and a half was it. And again, a long time ago now. We're talking 50 years ago, but a very difficult time.
So you sign up for the Coast Guard, and you say, I signed the paper and I'm ready to go ship myself off. What happened? So you just drive down the street, like, where is this place?
You go. I think you get on a bus, and I can't remember if it was before we got on the bus or before we got on an airplane to fly up to San Francisco. First time I was on an airplane. Wow. So when I flew from Burbank to San Francisco for basic training, you get sworn in along that path somewhere, and I can't remember exactly at what point. But so you're welcome to the Coast Guard, and things change.
Actually, there's something interesting here. But when you went onto the plane for the first time, mm-hmm. obviously you were traveling everywhere and shows and this, because, mm-hmm. and I'll tell a story in a second about where we met up at the airport. How was the planes journeys from the first time that you traveled and going onto a plane, and I'm sure it's going to be a suit and tie event, to today? Well,
the things that have changed, back then, it seems to me the airplanes were never full.
They weren't?
No. There was quite often you'd get on an airplane and there might only be 10 or 15 passengers on it. Wow. I was actually on late flights, coming home usually, where the airplane could have held 80 people and there were only 10 people on board.
That's all it was?
Yeah. Wow. So somewhere along the line, again, things changed dramatically. The airports or airlines had to show more profit or whatever it was, but gas prices got higher. Things did change, but then it got to almost every flight you were on was absolutely full.
Was it a special event though, like going on an airplane back then? Like when you were going on, like were you saying, "Oh, I'm nervous"? Were you scared? Like,
not really. It to me, it was just the acceleration of the airplane, the short time it took to get from one place to another. I mean, I was in San Francisco in less than an hour, and I'd never done that before, so it was very interesting.
So, what about the smoking? Like, were the people smoking on the plane? Because that's
absolutely.
It was smoking area, just throwing cigarettes out to everybody.
I think the only time you couldn't smoke was on takeoff and landing. But other than that, everybody was lighting up. And you could actually get on an airplane, and the interior of the airplane, you could see where the smoking section was because it was yellow, and from the nicotine.
It's funny how people nowadays will not get to see a lot of this, of seeing like the color coordination in the plane of where you sit, and even the smoking sign. It's there, but I think you can't smoke on any planes nowadays.
No, I haven't seen that in years, but. It was, again, because you could be one row behind the smoking section, and technically you weren't in the smoking section.
You were just feeling the wind blowing.
Which was pretty amazing.
So you get on a plane, and now your parents, they were How were they reacting with you going to the Coast Guard?
I didn't, probably not much. There was not much lead into it.
Okay.
It was like one day I was home and, living a pretty, normal life, and the next day I was gone. So I didn't really see much leading into that.
Were your parents concerned?
I don't think there was that much concern. It was kind of hard to read. I didn't see it if there was.
Was it very normalized because like the TV was saying and other people were doing it? Did that normalize what was going on in that era where it's okay, everybody, this is normal. Send your son to Vietnam. Send your child to the. That was very normalized.
Well, during a draft, again, everything changes. Every young man had an obligation. The obligation was 6 years. Wow. And I know there's other countries now that I still have a similar thing. I think Israel has something like that. But so you had a 6-year obligation, unless there were a medical deferment or the student deferment could delay it.
Yeah.
It didn't actually get you out of your obligation.
Got it. So you're getting on the plane. You're on the way to San Francisco. And then you get to your Coast Guard position. So what happens? Someone picks you up and says,
"Yeah, you're on
welcome."
the bus, and then your whole life changes.
What do they do? What do they do?
Well, it's at that point, it's very military.
Yes.
You think of the Coast Guard, it's like a yacht club. No, it was quite military. So
shaved your head.
Yeah, and you get something that's like a drill sergeant that you see in the movies, very similar. You go through all your basic training, marching, rifle handling, and again, I'm going back 50 years now, so this is
no, that's what's so fascinating because we wouldn't see this, and it's I think about like how people would even relate to that. Like, if you were to tell everybody now that they're going to be drafted, like, does everybody stop protesting or like? But
well,
sorry, but yeah,
we did have there's people who went up across the border into Canada and lived up there for a while. There was a lot of things going on. Music was much better then. Liked it. So again, a long time ago.
So okay, so you start your first week in the Coastal Guard. Like, what do they teach you? Like, they're making you do press ups. I mean, what are you doing?
Well, yeah, there's physical training, but there's a lot of it is teaching you different damage control, rescue techniques. There was some life-saving techniques, CPR, things like that. There's a lot of that, a lot of education. They teach you how to paint.
Wow.
how to paint the side of a ship.
Did they really?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of, because when you're at that level, there's you haven't advanced through the ranks at all. So you did a lot of the basic stuff.
So when do they take you out into the ocean? Like, I presume, unless would you have been into the ocean and see if you get seasick or not? Because I'm one of those guys who gets seasick where I'm throwing up everywhere.
Almost everybody would at some point get seasick because after boot camp the cutter I was on was 82 foot search and rescue. And
you said cutter, is that what they call it?
Coast Guard cutter, yeah.
A cutter is a ship?
Yeah.
Okay.
And depending on what size,
yeah.
The small ones aren't. The smaller ones, I think it was 40 foot or less. Again, this is going way back, but weren't referred to as cutters. But that would have been because of the way that the specific cutter that I was on was built.
Yeah.
It did a lot of rocking, so almost everybody got seasick. And unless you were out for an extended period of time, and then you kind of got used to it.
How did they get everybody used to the seasickness? How did people handle that?
You eventually become used to it.
How bad of a shape were you in when you were doing it?
You just really don't feel very good. And not so bad that it limits your activity or what you can do or to perform, but you just don't feel good. So
they just say, go through it. They didn't give you any tips and say, hey, eat some ginger.
There was things back then. There was things like Dramamine, which was a motion sickness pill.
Yeah, I think they still give that nowadays, right?
Yeah, I think they have that. As far as I remember, they have some newer ones that are a little bit better. Astronauts take it. Yeah, it's because they get motion sickness too.
So they put you on a ship. You get over your seasickness, and now you're waiting to be called out. Like what's the moments?
You have a specific rate. I was a bosun's mate. So I was
Hang on, you were
bosun's mate.
Bosun's mate?
Which is line handling and anything on the deck, which is kind of the majority, as opposed to being an engineman where you'd be down, taking care of the engine. But it was, and then we did search and rescue. I wasn't on the type of boat or cutter that would be out for long periods of time. Okay. It was search and rescue and law enforcement patrol. And I know the Coast Guard mandate has changed quite a bit now, and they do have many more long-range cutters that are out for a long time. But
so how long were you actually in the Coast Guard? Like, how long did you actually serve then?
Well, it was what I did, again, because of the 6-year obligation, I did active reserve. So I was, the initial enlistment was 6 months. And then I had 2 weeks every summer and 1 weekend every month. It's much like the National Guard. Their schedule is very much like the National Guard. So on those weekends, I would be a member of the crew, of an active crew, for that full weekend, and then the following month for 6 years.
So going through this, like being there, were you? Was it like college, or was this like something that you were concerned about? What was in your mind at that moment?
I think the most effect it had on me was it did interrupt a schooling, a university. Yeah. So when I did end up getting back out, I didn't go back to school. So I did get enough credits for an AA. But I never went back to school, so that's when my career started.
So, but the feeling of like being there though, was it like when you go to college and you think like you're dorming out with a bunch of guys and giving each other a high five? Was there a fun moment in that too that you looked forward to?
Absolutely. I mean, the relationships you build there also are very close. I mean, you're living. Ours was an 8-man crew, and you're living on an 82-foot boat. We didn't have some of the cutters had a boathouse. Yeah. So when you weren't out search and rescue, whatever, you had a boathouse stay. We actually stayed on the boat.
You actually stayed on the boat?
Yeah.
So was it very serious, or there were guys telling their stories and drinking and partying? Like, I see a smile when I say that. So they must have been good.
You had 2 crews. Yeah. So you would be on for 2 days and then off for 2 days. In the case of an active Coast Guardsman on active duty, again, I was on for a weekend, but no, there wasn't any. On the ship I was on, the boat I was on, there wasn't any partying.
There wasn't nighttime diving into the ocean, none of that stuff.
Pretty serious, yeah.
So you do your 6 years in.
It was 6 years total. Yeah, with in the active reserve. Again, that's your obligation. There's different ways of performing that 6 years. Like if you were drafted into the Army, you would do 2 years active duty for straight 2 years, and then 4 years in active reserve. But it's still considered a 6-year obligation.
So you come out now and you're trying to find out what you're going to do next. You go into camera support. Where do you go from there?
Well, the first place was sales and rental house in Hollywood. Okay. A company that you know is Alan Gordon Enterprises. Was the first place I worked, and that was like 1 block south of Sunset on Coinga, and pretty active, pretty busy rental house at the time. Still are, still in business, still in Hollywood. But very interesting because you met so many interesting people.
People who don't know what a rental house is, because like even for me, when I came into this industry of trying to do the logistics for the movie industry, like I did not know what a rental house was. What does a rental house do?
Well, you would go in if you were going to produce a movie, and you're a crew, a production crew, or the DP or the assistant DP. That's where you could rent full package. Okay. Your cameras, your tripod, your fluid head, most the rental houses, camera rental houses, don't do lighting. You'd go to a separate rental house for the lighting, but almost everything else you need, a dolly, audio, you could get that all in one place.
Why do they rent versus buying? Like, why don't they just buy?
Well, some people do buy, but the technology does change, particularly now. Back there in the day when it was all film and not digital, the technology didn't change as fast, but it does change very quickly now. So if you buy a camera, a very expensive camera, it could be obsoleted, like HD was obsoleted by 4K, and 4K could be obsoleted by 6K. It can become, you could be sitting on a very expensive camera and your producer would want the next model up. Yes. So you got a camera that's not doing you much good.
So I mean, the pricing of this stuff, because I remember back in the day when IFS began this industry too, like the cameras, I remember Ari had like a $500,000 camera and $1 million camera. And I remember the insurance said, only one camera per plane when we were putting stuff on planes. But obviously the industry revolutionized where these cameras started dropping to like $16,000, yeah. 17. And actually, that's actually where you actually introduced us to one of our biggest customers over here, yeah. Which was Red.
yeah, right, exactly. Well, Red did change the industry quite a bit. They did introduce very high-level production, motion picture, feature film production quality cameras at a much cheaper price. Yeah. So, but performance levels were still very high.
So okay, so you go into Alan Gordon and you're working your way around this industry now. How is Hollywood and Burbank then, like in terms of environment, of everybody coming here because they think they're going to be actors and movie stars, and everyone you're hearing what's happening, and then some of the Spider-Man on Hollywood Boulevard was an actor once. Or how was the mindset and people back then?
Well, it was very interesting because again, everybody that you'd meet, if you go into a restaurant, your waiter was probably an avid editor. Yeah. That was the joke, was you want an avid editor, just ask your waiter. Yeah. That's the way you'd get one. But it has changed. You still see a lot of people that want to be in front of the camera, yeah. that want to be an actor, actress that move from all over the world or anywhere in the United States to Hollywood, yeah. or Burbank. Or maybe New York, same thing, but you do see quite a bit of that for people that want to be in front of the camera.
So everybody around, so everybody was trying to be in the industry, everybody down the street was trying to be in the industry. Was it the party of everybody getting to know everybody, of who's who going to be here, looking for this producer, looking for this editor, looking for this actress, actor, come second call? Is that? Yeah,
there's a lot of that, and a lot of people looking for introductions. Got it. They if you find out the guy down the street is a producer, yeah. Hey, could you introduce me to, Dick Clark or whoever it might have been? So but who all had, offices in the area.
So was it more of like, like when you go to Hollywood now and you go to Burbank now, like I know Jay Leno has his little garage over there, literally where the old office was, but how was it a safe place, like in terms of environment from what you see today? Because obviously the world has changed over the past 4 years, 5 years, mm-hmm. to where it was then, to going back even way further, because mm-hmm. Has it changed? Like, would you say like change in safety or cleanliness? Like, because there's a lot of homeless actually in Hollywood, Burbank now. It's I think Burbank is still a very safe place. I'm not sure, and I don't spend a lot of time, down in Hollywood. I do have to, as in consulting roles, I still get down to Hollywood once in a while, and I'm not sure. Hollywood seems to have had a few cycles where it seems like it maybe cleans up a little bit, and then kind of slides back down. I think right now it's in one of its lower cycles. A lot of homeless. That could be pandemic related. I'm not sure, but there is a lot. I don't see so much in Burbank, but if you just cross over into the North Hollywood side,
then it starts again. North Hollywood is got.
Then you just drive extra fast, 25 miles an hour. You hit like 90 miles an hour just to get out of there.
I don't feel particularly safe in those areas. Yeah, it's.
So you're going to Alan Gordon and you're in this industry because everywhere that you go, you've picked up a lot of people along the way, because we went to Cinegear.
Mm-hmm.
And at Cinegear, literally everybody is giving you high fives as we're walking down Cinegear. And then that thing you're talking about, introductions, I was seeing that introduction thing when we were in Cinegear together.
Right.
And but it was the YouTubers standing there filming themselves, that everybody is there. But literally all the stands that we were going to, you seem to know almost everybody. Like literally, I was shocked how many people that you knew while we were walking down the street.
Well, some of them are other manufacturers that you work with along the way and that have stayed in the business. One thing that I've noticed from my generation, that a lot of us entered the industry young and stayed. And the industry, I don't think, has grown, from my side of the industry, didn't grow that big or that fast. So my generation stayed, and kind of limited the younger generation from coming in, because there just wasn't vacancies. And I think that recently has changed, because in my generation, the baby boomers have retired or are starting to retire. There's still some of us left out there, but some of the companies I've worked for, their sales forces are much younger now, which is a good thing. It's I do think that's a good move.
Do you see though, like when like a lot of these new generation or millennial sales reps come into this market, and I see this too, do you feel like they're lacking a lot of the knowledge that, because when someone's talking about lighting and cameras and support and a fluid head and 2.0mm screw and all these weird stuff that you guys talk about, like for me it's like a foreign language. Like I'm trying to listen to it and say like, what's he talking about? And I hear 2mm and dovetail and all that type of stuff. A lot of the newer guys don't have that in-depth knowledge on how to do it, versus reading a script and a catalog of, yes, it's made from titanium.
Right. Well, I guess you could say some of that comes with longevity in a certain industry, in a certain position, where I can see, say, a younger generation comes in and sells cameras. Well, he doesn't know anything about anything else. He doesn't know about the tripod, the fluid head, doesn't know much about lighting. He knows the camera because that's what his job really consists of. Some situations where I've seen that, might be putting a huge camera on a small tripod, just because he didn't have the background or the knowledge. That you don't do that.
And I think people underestimate how much a tripod costs, especially the fluid head. Because when I was seeing the tripod, when you get the case for like $500, and that's a freebie.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right. I mean, it kind of shocks you on how much those things cost. How much is roughly like one of those fluid heads? Or
well, a fluid head itself could be $16,000.
Which for me, I would think in my mind would be a price of a camera,
right?
A high-end camera.
Yeah. And that's why the sales process is long, because somebody's not going to buy a $16,000 tripod that doesn't need one.
And what's a fluid head for people who don't know what a fluid head is?
Well, this is something that Chad O'Connor invented and got a full-size Academy Award for inventing it. It's just a fluid dampened or fluid controlled movement that makes your pans and tilts very smooth. Up until Chad O'Connor invented that, they were basically friction or fluidized or lubricated friction, and not really a full fluid controlled. It's a thick silicone that when you pan and tilt is very, very smooth. And there's a lot of other technology involved in it, but
so it's basically the thing that sits in. I'll give you a millennial version of why it's the thing that sits underneath the camera, right? Okay. So it's just basically making it very fluid.
Right.
Okay.
And Chad O'Connor's first customer was Walt Disney.
Wow, was it really?
Yeah, and he saw Chad using one filming a train. And unknown to Chad at the time, Walt Disney stepped off the train and saw this thing under his camera and asked him what it was. So, you mind if I try it? And Chad let him try it and asked, hey, can you make me one?
Wow.
Chad's first response was no. it's kind of a hobby. And he said, well, can you make me 10 of them? Yeah. And then he said, okay.
And is that how O'Connor began?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Chad was he's an engineer in a power plant for the city of Pasadena, and started building these in his garage. And then his wife then became a full-time employee. They got a office in Pasadena, and it just went on from there.
So Disney comes up to him and buys these fluid head, and this is actually how it starts. So do you know how much you sold the first one for? For $15,000.
It would have been much smaller head, because this was for very small film cameras. It would have been $500 or maybe $350. It would have been much less. This was back in the late 40s, early 50s.
So was this the start of the O'Connor brand? Like, this is, so Disney, now people see Disney using it. That guy says, where did you get it? Call Chad.
Right. That's basically it. Yeah. Then I think then I guess when it really became big was when Panavision started. Every fluid head they bought was O'Connor, and they put it.
And Panavision are a rental house?
Right.
Okay. Well, we work with Panavision, but they're considered a rental house too, and they rent equipment.
Right. Yeah, they're Panavision and Arri would be the leaders for feature filmmaking. There's a time when Panavision was probably on 90% of every feature film that you would see.
And we see this in the credits. So when you watch a movie, at the end of it, you see Panavision come up, who we work with. You see Chapman's come up. You see Joel Fisher, and they all do different. And
then they usually know which lenses, and if it was a Panavision camera, it would have been Panavision lenses. That becomes a big part of it also.
So Panavision buy the lenses now because they saw Disney or Walt Disney buying it or using it from Chad. He then starts supplying Panavision, and then he's off to the races. So when do you get associated with him?
Well, I was there twice. The first time was from 77 to 81. So that was kind of early on, before some of the heads that are really mainstream now were even there. And then when I came back again was in 2000. So just shortly before we met at O'Connor. So it would have been that was my second, and then they got purchased by Vitek. That took me up through 2018. So I was there for 18 years, the second time.
So like this industry, obviously it's changing. When you're talking, I can see how fast this thing is constantly changing, and trying to hold on to your pants, like trying to go through this is like, I think, a challenge by itself. So as you're seeing all these changes happen, and you're seeing the transition of the industry from what it was to what it is, what did it turn into from what it was then? Like in terms of equipment and who's coming into this industry, because now the place is flooded with people. Everyone wants to be an actor or an editor or a producer. What did you see happen?
Well, there's a number of things, but as far as technology changes and from a sales standpoint, technology changes are actually good. I mean, when I first started, news was shot in 60 millimeter film,
which is the little rolling thing, right?
Right. And I was sold those cameras. That was from Alan Gordon Enterprises. And you're too young to remember this, but when you watch television, if you watch the 5 o'clock news, you used to see there'd be a story that didn't have any image, no film. And at the end of the story, they would say, film at 11. So when you watch the 11 o'clock news, because they needed time to process the film.
Interesting.
So you wouldn't see it at the 5 o'clock news, you would see it on the 11 o'clock news.
So you just hear the sound?
Well, no, they would actually talk the story. They would just give you
and then prepare.
And then they would tell you at the end of the story, film at 11.
Wow.
And in the basement of most of your TV stations, there was a film processing lab.
Wow.
Funny thing is, very recently, I'd been to some maybe smaller market TV stations, and they would take you on a tour of the TV station. You'd go down into the basement. You could still smell the film processing chemicals. Yeah, and it had been years and years and years, but the smell of the chemicals was still there.
Wow.
Yeah, faint, but it's not like it was overwhelming, but you could still smell it.
So that's a big change, because now, I mean, people are practically making stuff on their phones. Like, I think people underestimate how much has come into our little iPhones with a camera and the 3 cameras and the 4 cameras, and I'm sure we're going to have one with the whole back full of cameras. But what it's capable of is...
well, the technology changes are amazing. I mean, even if I watch a 10 or 15-year-old NFL film clip, they're showing a highlight from 15 years ago, I look at it and go, wow, have we really advanced that far? Because everything looks, not the resolution isn't there, and the color isn't there. But I mean, there's been those technology changes. It's gone from film to video, then to digital, from analog video to digital video, and then from standard def to high def, and high def to 4K. And it's the changes have been just constant.
Do you think, like, with all these changes, that the quality, even though like the picture quality may be better, but sometimes people wanted to hear like the little popping in between it, or the feeling like it's coming on? Like, do you feel like that has eroded?
Well, some of it has, but I know in designing digital cameras from the designers that I've spoken to, they do make an effort. In some instances, if you make a digital cine camera, they make an effort to make that digital image look like a film image, whether it's adding grain or even from the lens side. The big thing now is old look lenses. They call it a bokeh, or the way the lens looks. That's a big part of those older lenses are in very high demand now. So.
I mentioned the story about when we met at the airport not too long. Well, this was several years ago, but it was a very weird time. You've always been very warm and humbling, and since the day I've met you, you've always treated me with a lot of respect, like very polite, and the guy I could come to, and I know that you know a little bit of everything.
I appreciate that.
And it was funny because that day was it was my wife's death anniversary, and it was the first time I had ever left the kids alone, and I was flying to Oklahoma for the first time, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm saying, shall I go? Should I have gone? Should I have gone? No, maybe I shouldn't have gone. And I'm questioning it in my heart, like I don't even know where I'm going and why I'm going. And it's funny because I met you at the airport at 5 a.m.
Right.
And I remember because you actually are the one that you calmed my nerves, and you being like, at least I know Bob is here. and it really calmed my nerves and made me feel really good. And it really helped me. Like emotionally, it was actually very comforting for me.
Well, I remember we had a chance to talk. I mean, we think we were both early for our flights, and we had a good chance to sit and talk. It was kind of quiet, and it was it was good. I remember that very well.
So that's why you've always had a place with me, and that's why I wanted everyone to know you've been extremely humble, like at everything that we've done together or worked together, and you have been extremely humble with all of this. And there's so much knowledge that you have, and like I said, I mentioned the cine gear. That was like amazing. I mean, when we were there, that really was amazing to me, of seeing how many people were literally just grabbing you and giving you high five. That was truly amazing.
Well, I feel the same. You've helped me out many times when I've needed to get something from one place to another quickly, and you've never let me down. So I do appreciate that.
I have to be good for something because my jokes only go so far.
Right. Always got to smile, and sometimes the logistics of getting things around is it's not that easy, and we need to get stuff there very quickly. Like they say, it's show business.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I know you drive a big Harley.
I do.
So you do. So I know that is something that I think you do for fun, right? So it was it's a cruiser.
Yeah, it's a cruiser. It's a big one, long distance cruiser. Yeah.
And that thing, it looks like it weighs a ton.
950 pounds.
So do you just take that and drive it around? Like, do you feel like the enjoyment of looking at
it? I do enjoy it. It is relaxing once you get out of traffic.
Yes.
But living here in LA, in Southern California, or in the LA area, I should say, is getting out of that traffic is not easy. So, but once you're out, it's very enjoyable, driving up the coast or wherever it might be.
So when you got that, was that really the plan? Like, I'm going to drive and go take this long distance. Like, is that what it was? Like road trip? Because I know you do little bikes too, but was this like just hit the road and?
That was my plan. I mean, I was looking for something to do in retirement, and that was always my excuse. Well, I got to work, so I can't go on a long cruise somewhere. And I thought, well, once I retire, what's stopping me? I can go anywhere I want. It hasn't really happened that way, but
it's on the list, right?
It's still on the bucket list.
Throw your wife in the back and just go and just say we're gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Turn up in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Throw a couple changes of clothes and just go. But again, that was the idea, but it hasn't really worked out that way. But it's still in the garage. It's ready. It's waiting to go. So.
Bob, I want to thank you for coming out and sharing with us, and just thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. You've done a lot for me, more than you think, but I appreciate everything you've done.
I appreciate it too, Amar. Thanks, and it's always good talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Subliminal. They can call me cocky, but no, I'm original. If they really wanna get it, they can come and get it. I be serving scoops, ayy, off all my loops, ayy. If you're watching Swiss Beatbox, just hit the replay. I be serving scoops, ayy, off all my tunes, ayy. If I'm just tripping on this beat, what the fuck about a feed, ayy. By the way, I still do this for the show. Ay.